Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to provide you with an urgent update on the war in Iran because the situation is escalating rapidly once again. Two American military personnel have now been killed following a major Iranian missile and drone attack on a military base in Jordan. Another American service member is currently listed as missing in action, and this takes the total number of US military personnel who've lost their lives during this conflict to 16, with more than 420 reportedly wounded. That's a very significant development because this is no longer simply a battle over shipping regulations, sanctions, blockades, or control over the Strait of Hormuz. American military personnel are now being killed directly by Iranian attacks. The United States is responding with a fresh wave of airstrikes, and Iran is expanding its attacks across several neighbouring countries. Commercial ships are being struck or prevented from moving. Oil facilities, power stations, military bases, bridges, radar facilities, and water infrastructure are all being dragged into this fighting. And the risk is that this conflict is now moving rapidly back towards levels of escalation that we saw during the most dangerous phases at the early stages. Now, before we get into the details of what's going on, could I ask anybody to give me a thumbs up for this video if you're enjoying these sorts of presentations, as it really does help me with the algorithm. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that red subscribe button. And if you can see the hype button, I know you only get, I think it's 3 per week or 3 per month, don't know the exact details. You only get a limited number. But if you could hit that hype button, it will really help this video because it will mean that the algorithm will promote it to more people and hopefully get some more views. So the attack in Jordan reportedly took place on Friday and involved Iranian ballistic missiles and drones. The United States has confirmed that 2 service members were killed, 1 remains missing, and 4 others were initially evacuated for treatment. Iranian state television subsequently claimed that at least 2 American fighter aircraft and 3 other aircraft were destroyed at the Al-Zaraz base in Jordan. However, those particular claims have not been independently verified, so should be treated with caution. But the death of 2 American personnel has been officially confirmed, and the US response was immediate. President Donald Trump authorized an 8th consecutive night of American strikes against Iran, and according to US Central Command, those strikes were intended to both punish the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps units responsible for the Jordan attack and to reduce Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The latest targets reportedly included Iranian coastal surveillance facilities, air defense systems, underground weapons storage sites, military logistics infrastructure, and wartime capabilities. And this is important because the United States is no longer carrying out the occasional retaliatory strike. It has now conducted 8 consecutive nights of attacks. The campaign is becoming broader, more sustained, and increasingly focused on infrastructure. Iranian authorities have reported strikes around Sirik and other parts of the Hormozgan province, the strategically important region bordering the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian reports say that bridges, a road tunnel, and other transport infrastructure have been damaged. The US has also reportedly struck surveillance sites and facilities that could be used by Iran to detect, track, and attack vessels moving through the strait. That apparent American objective is to weaken Iran's ability to control the shipping lanes. But Iran is not backing down. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Iran has launched missile and drone attacks against US bases and US allies across Jordan, Kuwait, and Bahrain. There have also been reports of an Iranian missile attack triggering emergency warnings in Saudi Arabia, including around the Al-Kharj, where American personnel are based, and Yanbu, which contains an important oil export terminal. Iran has reportedly also attacked Camp Arafal in Kuwait and the Aleb al-Saib air base. It claims to have destroyed a radar facility and attacked American military support operations. Kuwait has also confirmed that one of its oil facilities was hit in repeated Iranian attacks, causing significant damage and injuries. A Kuwaiti power generation and water desalination facility has also been struck, causing a fire and disrupting electricity generating units. Iran has additionally claimed attacks on American aircraft and intelligence facilities in Bahrain. So this conflict is spreading across the whole region. Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, and potentially Saudi Arabia are all now being pulled more deeply into this confrontation because they host American forces or strategically important infrastructure. And that creates an extremely dangerous escalation cycle. Iran attacks an American base, the US responds by striking Iranian infrastructure, Iran then retaliates against more American bases and American regional allies, the US then expands its list of targets, and with every round of attacks, the potential for a miscalculation becomes greater. This war began on February the 28th, when the United States and Israel launched their initial strikes against Iran. That means this conflict has now been affecting the world for around 142 days. We are approaching 5 months of disruption, volatility, and uncertainty. There was a period when it appeared that the situation might be stabilising. An interim ceasefire was reached. Shipping flows began slowly recovering, oil prices started to fall, and there was some hope that the worst of the economic disruption might be behind us. But that agreement has now effectively collapsed, and we are seeing a return to sustained American strikes, Iranian retaliation, and renewed attacks on shipping. The Strait of Hormuz is once again at the centre of everything. Under normal circumstances, as we've discussed before, around 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes through this strait on a daily basis. It also carries around 20% of liquefied natural gas. That means what happens in this relatively small stretch of water has consequences for almost every major economy in the world. Iran says that vessels must comply with its rules for navigating the strait. The United States says it's defending freedom of navigation and is enforcing a naval blockade around Iranian ports. Both sides are now taking action against ships. Iran's Revolutionary Guard claims 4 vessels attempting to pass through the strait have been stopped using a combined military and drone operation. Iranian media also claim that 2 oil tankers exploded after moving through a mined route south of the strait, although the US military have described that report as false, so we don't know whether it's actually correct. US Marines have boarded a tanker close to Hormuz, and another vessel was seized by armed men near Yemen, raising the possibility that disruption could spread to the entrance of the Red Sea as well. The Houthis in Yemen are an ally of Iran. Iran have also claimed to have fired a shore-to-sea cruise missile towards a US vessel in the northern Indian Ocean. Traffic through Hormuz has fallen sharply, not surprisingly. Before the war, around 130 vessels would move through the area on a typical day. During some of the worst periods of disruption, that number has fallen to basically nothing. Crews are increasingly reluctant to enter the region, even when additional danger payments are offered, and at least 17 commercial seafarers have lost their lives during this conflict. That matters because the economic damage is not determined simply by whether the strait is technically open or closed. The real question is whether shipping companies, tanker owners, insurers, and crews believe that it's safe enough to use. A waterway can officially be described as open, but if ships are being attacked, insurance becomes prohibitively expensive, crews refuse to sail, and tanker companies decide not to take the risk, then in practical economic terms, the route will basically be closed. And that brings us to the issue of oil. At the beginning of this year, the oil market was sitting at around $60 per barrel, and many analysts believed that growing global supply would keep prices relatively subdued for the whole of 2026. However, the war then began, and oil prices started surging. Brent moved above $100 per barrel in the most intensive stages of the conflict, and at the end of March, Brent reached almost $117 during trading and settled at the end of that day at $113. US crude also moved above $100. Physical barrels became even more expensive, with some grades reportedly trading at up to $150 because refiners were desperate to secure actual supplies. Prices subsequently fell as ceasefire negotiations progressed and some shipping resumed. But that did not erase the economic damage, and now oil prices are rising again. Most recently, Brent crude was trading at around $88 per barrel, and that was before the market had fully absorbed the deaths of the US personnel in Jordan and the latest round of US retaliatory strikes. The oil market is currently closed for the weekend, but when they reopen, it's likely that we will see prices going up. 2 US service members have been killed. Another is missing. The United States has launched further military strikes. Iran is attacking bases and infrastructure all across the Gulf. Commercial vessels are being threatened, and Iran is warning that it could move into what it describes as full-scale offensive operations if the US attacks continue. None of that has been reflected in the current market price for oil. Now, there are other factors that affect the price of oil, including global demand, OPEC production, investor positioning, and the possibility of another diplomatic intervention. But the risk premium is clearly increasing. And there is now a realistic possibility that Brent could move back towards $100 per barrel if the attacks continue or shipping through Hormuz deteriorates further. The uncomfortable reality is that the world has already used a significant part of its emergency resources. The International Energy Agency coordinated a record release of 400 million barrels from strategic petroleum reserves earlier in the conflict. The United States supplied the largest share of that. The American strategic reserves have now fallen to approximately 320 million barrels, which is their lowest level since 1983. That does not mean the US has run out of emergency oil, but it does mean that the buffer is considerably smaller than it was before this war started. Strategic reserves can soften a temporary disruption, and they can reassure markets and supply refineries while alternative arrangements are made, but they can't permanently replace millions of barrels of daily production and exports from the Gulf. Once oil is released from the reserve and consumed, it's gone forever. And eventually that reserve has to be replenished, which creates additional demand in the future, and obviously demand pushes up prices. The wider economic consequences are therefore becoming increasingly serious. Higher crude prices feed into gasoline and petrol prices. They increase the cost of diesel, jet fuels, plastics, chemicals, fertilizer, and transportation. Higher shipping insurance premiums increase the cost of moving almost everything. Airlines face higher fuel bills. Manufacturers face higher energy and import costs. Farmers face more expensive fertilizer. Consumers ultimately will face higher prices. And governments and central banks face a new wave of inflation before they've fully defeated the previous wave. The International Energy Agency has already estimated that the disruption caused by the war could reduce global oil demand by around 1.1 million barrels per day during the rest of this year. And that is not good news. Demand is falling because higher prices and disruption are weakening economic activity. The IEA has described the impact as spreading across products and regions after almost 4 months of interruptions. So this is not simply an oil price story. It's an economic growth story. It's an inflation story and an interest rate story. And increasingly, it's becoming a global trade story. The central message from the latest developments is that this conflict is now escalating again. The temporary ceasefire did not deliver a lasting peace. The battle for control of the Strait of Hormuz has resumed. American military personnel, unfortunately, are being killed. Iranian and Gulf infrastructure is being attacked. Commercial crews are dying, and both sides appear willing to cross boundaries that had previously been avoided. The greatest danger is not necessarily that either side deliberately chooses to begin a much larger war. The danger is the cycle of retaliation creates one. One attack kills another American personnel. One US strike causes major civilian casualties. One missile hits an oil terminal. One tanker sinks in the shipping channel. Or one strike disables a major power or desalination facility. Any one of those events could produce another round of escalation. And the global economy is extraordinarily exposed because so much of the world's energy still moves through this one narrow, increasingly dangerous stretch of water. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments, but hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If it's available to you and you can see that hype button, then please hit that because it will really help this video. Thank you so much to everyone that's supporting me. If you bought me a coffee or sent me YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you for that support. I really appreciate it. It's the thing that keeps me motivated and making these videos, so I really do appreciate your support. Thank you so much.